All right, let's talk about something we all use every single day: money. But have you ever stopped and really wondered where it comes from? Not where your paycheck comes from, but where the money in the system is actually created. The answer? Well, it's probably not what you learned in school. And honestly, it might just change the way you look at the whole economy.
See, we all learn this simple story, right? That banks are basically safekeepers. You deposit your savings, and the bank then lends that exact money out to someone else who needs a loan. It's a simple idea. It makes perfect sense. But what if I told you it's mostly a myth?
Okay, so before we can bust that myth wide open, we all need to be speaking the same language, the language of central bankers. And that means we need to get to know the M's, the main ways they measure the money supply. First up, we've got M0. You can think of this as the bedrock, the absolute foundation of the monetary system. It's the physical cash, notes and coins, plus the electronic reserves that commercial banks hold at the central bank, like the RBI. They call it high-powered money for a reason, and we'll get to that in just a second. Then we have M1. This is basically transaction money. It's the cash that's actually in our wallets, but much more importantly, it includes all the money sitting in our checking accounts that we can spend instantly with a debit card or a digital transfer. This is the money that's ready to go at a moment's notice. And finally, we get to M3, or broad money. Now, this is the big one, the number that the Reserve Bank of India watches like a hawk. It's everything in M1, plus money that's a little less accessible, like fixed deposits. It's the broadest measure of purchasing power in the economy, and it gives the clearest signal of what might be coming next. All right, now that we know the lingo, let's jump back to that familiar story, the one from the textbook that tries to explain how all that M3 money is actually born. This classic explanation is called the fractional reserve banking theory, and its core idea is dead simple. It all starts with a deposit. Someone has to save their money in a bank first, because without that initial deposit, the bank has nothing to lend out. And here's where that high-powered M0 money supposedly comes into play. The theory goes like this. You deposit 100 rupees, the bank has to keep a fraction, let's say 10 rupees, as a reserve. It then lends out the other 90. The person who borrows that money spends it, and whoever gets it deposits it into their bank. That second bank then keeps 9 rupees and lends out 81. And you can see where this is going. It's a chain reaction, where that first 100 rupee deposit gets multiplied over and over again throughout the system. So, the crucial point of this whole story is this. The central bank is in control. The amount of reserves they create, that M0 money, sets a hard limit. The banks are just intermediaries, multiplying a pool of money that already exists. They can't just create it on their own. It's a neat theory. It's tidy, it makes sense. But what if, in the real world, the entire process is completely backward? So let's talk about the modern reality. And just to be clear, this isn't some fringe idea. This is the view held and publicly stated by major central banks all over the world, from the Bank of England to the RBI. This is called the credit creation theory, and it flips the old model completely on its head. The core idea is stunningly simple. Loans create deposits. Banks don't wait around for your savings. The very act of making a loan is what creates brand new money. This is where your mind might get a little blown. Look at what happens on a bank's books the instant a loan is approved. Let's say you get a loan for 1,000 rupees. The bank doesn't go into a vault and take that money out. They just type numbers into your account. At that exact moment, the bank gets a new asset. That's your promise to pay them back. And simultaneously, it creates a new liability for itself, the 1,000 rupee deposit that is now in your account. Poof, that money was created out of thin air. Yeah, just let that sink in. Commercial banks aren't just passing money around, they're literally creating new digital money, which makes up almost all of the M1 and M3 we talked about, every single time they approve a loan. So we've got two completely opposite ways of looking at this. One says deposits create loans, the other says loans create deposits. Let's put them side by side to really see the clash. This chart just makes it crystal clear. In the old theory, reserves are the starting point for everything. In the new theory, they're an afterthought. A bank makes a loan first, creating a deposit, and then it finds the reserves it needs to have on hand. And what about deposits? The old theory says they're created through that long multiplication process. The reality? They're created instantly. But here's the most important part. The real limit on money creation isn't a fixed pile of reserves. It's the number of creditworthy people and businesses asking for loans and the bank's own appetite for risk. And again, this isn't some hot debate. This is the accepted consensus. The world's major central banks and the real-world data all confirm that this is how money is actually created today, not through that old textbook model.
Okay, so who cares, right? Why does this academic difference actually matter to any of us? Well, it matters a lot because it fundamentally changes how economic policy actually works.
If you believe the old theory, you'd try to manage the economy by tinkering with the quantity of reserves. But if you understand the modern reality, you know the most powerful tool is changing the price of creating new money. In other words, the interest rate. By making it cheaper or more expensive for banks to lend, the central bank directly influences how much new money gets created. So let's just boil it all down. The old story? A myth. The reality is that loans create deposits. This means commercial banks are the primary creators of the money we all use. And that simple fact is exactly why a central bank's interest rate decision is front-page news. It's the main control valve for the creation of new money in the entire economy. And this leaves us with one last huge question to think about. If the vast majority of our money is created out of thin air by private banks every time they issue a loan, what are the real limits? Is it just about profitability and risk appetite, or is there something more? It's a question that gets to the very heart of how our modern economy is built.